I want to welcome everyone to session D2 on wellness and self-care, a COVID update. Our speaker today is Heather Pierulki, one of my favorite speakers. She is a natural-born connector who has, for the last 8 years, created positive impacts within the realms of Hawaii's mental health, substance abuse, and homeless services sector, spearheading the Housing First model approach here in Hawaii and embodying a harm reduction approach to tackling some of our community's most challenging social inequities. Heather is an experienced therapist and previously served as a director of behavioral health at Helping Hands Hawaii. And she focused on health, well-being, and supportive care for some of Hawaii's most challenged populations. Heather now consults full-time for her own company, ChangeWorks, and emphasizes creating impactful change in our local community. And this is her contact information. I can pass this on to you after she speaks. And as described, this is going to be an interactive discussion. So I'm going to pass the WebEx ball to you, Heather, and you can take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. That's such a wonderful introduction. And every time I hear someone read that, I think to myself, like, did I really do all that stuff? But I think one of the beautiful things about our community here is that we're such a locally connected family. And the majority of the time, we take really good care of each other and partner with each other to ensure that the best work is getting done within the capacity that we have, right? So as much as I would love to talk to you about all of the amazing programs and all of the incredible opportunities we have here to serve some of our more impoverished communities, today we're going to talk about you guys as providers. And I hope that this presentation provides you with some information that you can use ongoing. It's really intended to be a pouring of concrete in a way. If you've gotten away from your wellness or you have been like unable to focus on any sort of wellness, it really is intended to give you a start or a beginning rather than a kind of full-blown plan. And remember that wellness is a fluid process. Sometimes we're really good at it. Sometimes we struggle with it more. And so what we'd really like to do is create a discussion about what wellness and self-care means. For those of you that I know personally, you know that I think balance is kind of a lot of baloney. I would love to think that we can ultimately find a 50-50 balance, but the truth of the matter is most of the time, sometimes our family needs 80% and our work only gets 20. Sometimes our community gets 60%, so our family and our work gets to split the other 40. And so it really is about finding of how we focus on ourselves so that we can bring our best self to ourselves independently, and then spear that to our family, spear that to our community, spear that to our work. And so with COVID and the challenges around that, we really are weathering this kind of long-term, ongoing, temporary version of that are normal. So for today, I'm just going to invite you to share some space with me. I'm going to give you guys some tips. I'm going to talk about why wellness is so important and why if you don't prioritize it, it tends to lead to things like stress and burnout. So we're going to do our best to kind of pour the concrete of our foundation a little bit so that we can do some things ongoing. So Anna, thank you for the amazing introduction. I feel honored and privileged to be invited to be here today with you. And with our community. Why does what I say matter? Well, it doesn't have to. I mean, I've spent the last kind of 15 years of my life trying to develop a balance between out to the community and what I take in for myself. So I really have tried to work on educating myself and the people around me in how to better balance our time so that we're taking care of ourselves so that we can give to our community. What I'm looking for today from this experience is to share information with all of you. And what I hope you guys will gather from this experience is this idea of how can I help? What can I offer to you? How can I give you feedback? How can I brainstorm with you so that you can implement these things into your day-to-day? This is also applicable for people who manage teams, people who are higher level, so that you guys can start to implement really intentional wellness plans in your workplace as well. So feel free to interrupt on the chat. You can use the written one. You can interrupt me. That's totally fine if you have a question. So don't worry about that. So the first thing that we want to do is define what it means to be well. Well, like I said, wellness is a super fluid process. And so in my research over time, in trying to figure out what the best way to approach wellness is, I've actually learned some interesting things. One, wellness is the state of being in good health, but it's also an actively pursued goal. So if you just Google, what does it mean to be well? It'll tell you, you have to actively pursue this idea of being well. There are many dimensions. The majority of the research agrees that it's about 7 dimensions, right? So you have your physical or your body, how well your internal systems are. You have your social wellness, how connected are you to your community? You have your emotional wellness, how well do you feel? How are you able to control your reactivity? How intensely do you feel your emotions? You have your spiritual wellness, so whatever you're connected to in terms of a higher power or a community of care. Environmental wellness, which is how well is the space around you? Do you get outside? Do you get sunshine? Do you dip in the water? Do you run? Do you work out? Do you create an environment around you that brings health to you? Your occupational wellness, how well is your workplace? How balanced is the time that you spend doing work? And your intellectual wellness, how much do you feed your brain? So all of those dimensions can be super, super, super overwhelming if you think about all of them at once. So my suggestion is, rather than trying to tackle or understand all of them, you just focus on 1 or 2 at a time. The other will sort of come after. Wellness is an active process. So it is about, in some ways, setting up a list of tasks, right? So in order to be well, I feel like the easiest thing for me to implement is my physical wellness. So I'm going to take a 10-minute walk every single day before I start my day. It is an intention to make a dedicated choice or a dedication to leading a healthy and fulfilling life. This comes from the Muncie Journal, which has a plethora of information about lots of different topics. And then remember that wellness is a really dynamic process. I love when people tell me, why are we still, or ask me, why are we still talking about wellness? Well, we're still talking about it because it's ongoing and it changes depending on the needs. My wellness plan today is completely different than my wellness plan was a year ago. Not just because of COVID, but because I'm at home the majority of the time. So a year ago, I was spending 75% of my time out in the community. Now I'm spending 85% of my time in my house. So it has to be a dynamic process of change, growth, not just not being unwell. So there's lots of ways that in a workplace we approach wellness. There's lots of ways our day-to-day that we approach wellness. There's some traditional attempts like I'm going to park further away from the store so I get more steps. I'm going to reduce my smoking, quit my smoking. I'm going to take a little walk at lunch so I can get 5 minutes of sunshine in my day-to-day. I'm going to make healthier choices with my food. There's inclusive approaches. These tend to be like family-based or friend group-based, but workplaces have started to do this too, where everybody gets a Fitbit and you have a step challenge, or you have workplace challenges, who can body fat, or who can make the wisest food choices. And then you have modeling through leadership commitments. You have living well within your community. So sometimes that's creating a gym at home, or forcing open breaks during the day in your workplace, programs available and provided by your company, by your health plan. That's your overall living well process. And then we have in our workplaces employee assistance, right? So support that's provided outside of work for mental health and wellness referrals. These are all really wonderful approaches, but they're secondary to our ability to understand and improve our own self so that we can then actively engage in all of these wonderful things. So when we make a wellness plan, we have expectations. As you know, and I love this little graphic, our expectations are like, oh yeah, I'm going to start and then everything's just going to get better. But most of the time, our expectations turn into the reality on the right, which is sometimes we are really great and we are successful and we're hitting it hard. And then sometimes we have an entire week of feeling ill, or we have a workplace crisis, or we have a weekend where it's full of really fun things, but we don't actually get to spend any time being well on our own. So our expectations are sometimes a little bit sideways. We have the set it and forget it, right? If I just do one thing, it'll snowball into other things. Our expectation that it'll be easy or that it'll be seamless. It's as simple as just making a decision to go to the gym every day. Or it's just as simple as like, I know I need to do it and that's enough. So when I think about work-life balance and I think about the expectations that I set up for myself and that I help other people figure out how to define and set up, I think about work-life balance as the ability to disconnect when you're away. And so we have this expectation that at 5 p.m. we're going to turn off our phones. And in a way, especially in the nonprofit community, especially working with some of our more difficult populations, we know that that doesn't really exist. And so we have this expectation that I'm just going to turn off my phone and everything will be fine. Well, the truth of the matter is most of the time we aren't able to do that. So here's some barriers that get in our way. Our expectations have a full-on clash with reality. Our employees or our leadership is cynical that these sorts of wellness plans will work. We have poor leadership or ineffective leadership, including leaders who poorly model overworking and pressure and getting it done no matter the cost. And this really does come down to our leaders taking responsibility and making changes on their own so that it does snowball to the rest of the workplace as well. So sometimes it is about accountability at the top. Some of the other barriers are miscommunication, like, oh, I thought we were walking 5,000 steps a day. And then the other 3 people in your group are like, oh yeah, I forgot, or oh yeah, I got in the way, or oh yeah, I did this instead. So those are some of the barriers that get in the way. Well, what does a resolution look like? A resolution looks like when a plan comes together, you have good, healthy communication, you can emotionally regulate when stress gets in the way of creating your wellness plan, and you have really good boundaries that work for most of the people that are involved in the plan. So let's say you're trying to get your family involved in a 20-minute walk after dinner every single day, but there's 6 of you. And so the boundary that you create is from 7 to 7:30 every single night. We finish dinner, we clean up the kitchen, and then everybody's involved. Maybe it's a no TV for an hour rule, or maybe it's a no phones for an hour rule. And then your parents and other kind of in your house have to actually model that as well. But the resolution does come when we make a dedicated effort to create something that isn't negotiable. And then we need encouragement. We need ongoing ways to encourage each other to continue on with our goal. So this is Molly. She's our pit bull. Peanut is not in the picture because Peanut can't take a picture to save his life. But the wellness plan that you're going to create starts with what's your joy. If you want to be physically well, but you hate running, don't make running your plan. That's not going to work because you're going to hate it and you're not going to want to do it. And then you're going to find every excuse you can not to. But if you want to be physically well and you love to swim, then try to figure out how you can implement 15 minutes of swimming into your day 3 times a week. And then once you've monitored and totally successfully completed that, then make it 4 days. And as you discover the things that bring you joy and the things that make you feel good, start to make dedicated choices to actually commit to those things. The more that you identify the things that create joy for you, and the more that you make choices to implement those joys in your life, the better off your wellness plan will be. So Molly's part of my joy. For those of you that know me, I have 2 dogs and they're my life. I take them for walks every day. I get out into the sunshine, and that's part of what helps me continue to feel well and helps rip me away from the computer so that I can get outside and breathe fresh air. She also enjoys it, so it's mutually beneficial. So I thought I would teach you guys a little bit about burnout. And I neglected to put a slide in here that I can send on to you guys later, but it's a cost comparison or a comparison of stress versus burnout. And just so you guys know, so I can plant a little bit of seed, stress is an over, burnout is a removal escalation. So stress is a heightened sense of emotion, burnout is a total withdrawal. And so when you think about your life, you think about your job, you think about the work that you do, you think about your family, you think about your community, have you experienced it? I have several occasions. Anna mentioned that I was previously the director of behavioral health at Helping Hands Hawaii, and part of my recognizing burnout was understanding that the agency didn't do anything wrong, the job wasn't wrong, but the way that I approached and the things that I took on with the job are what created my burnout. And it happened over time. I actually kind of barely noticed that it was happening, but my signs of burnout were definitely a special type of workplace stress, a state of physical exhaustion, emotional exhaustion that also was accompanied by this feeling of reduced accomplishment and a loss of personal identity. So what happened in that last kind of year that I was the director was I started prioritizing everything except myself. I started diving into too much. I started accepting too much responsibility. I started getting really stressed out really quickly. And everything that I was doing to keep myself well went out the door. And so what I think is really interesting, and when we differentiate stress from burnout, stress, again, is an overexertion. So it's a feeling of being overwhelmed, whereas burnout is a complete withdrawal. And according to the research, which I think is likely going to evolve over time, it really does attribute burnout to a special type of workplace stress in which it differentiates it from home life stress. And the reason for that is because it's not just this stress at work, this overburdening, it also comes with that reduced accomplishment and loss of personal identity. So it's where your physical self and your emotional self are just not tied. So when we look for balance, and balance is about fluidity and getting it together and making it happening, and sometimes having a little bit of grace with yourself. The interesting thing that I've found in my research and my practice, balance isn't necessarily about managing your time in a more effective way. There is a piece of that that comes along with creating wellness and being well, but it really does come down to this idea of better boundary management. We need to be able to say to ourselves, enough is enough. I need to be able to do this instead of this. And as I was sort of getting ready for my day today, I realized one of the most effective ways to implement wellness is not to add something to your day. It's to replace something with an activity or a practice that helps you feel well. So rather than, oh my gosh, I have to find an hour, it's about renegotiating your day so that you can open up an hour. So not about additional things, but rather about setting different boundaries so that you can more efficiently use your time. Okay, now that we've explained it, we get it. Now what do we do? So if you guys want, you can take out a piece of paper and jot a couple of notes if something comes up for you during this particular slide. Otherwise, you can certainly take this practice on and bring it. But I'll share a couple of personal experiences with me. So, okay, we get it. What do I have to do? Well, for me, when I asked myself the first question, what does creating balance and practicing self-care look like to you? Most of it was really rooted in my physical wellness. My emotional wellness tends to be pretty even. I am not very prone to panic. I tend to be a pretty calm individual. I have a special talent with de-escalating stressful situations. So my wellness felt like it was pretty good. My occupational wellness, not so great. I felt like I was overdoing my workplace. So I think I needed to kind of brainstorm a little bit about how it looked like to implement physical stuff while still keeping my job. And then my community wellness, my environmental wellness, all that stuff was pretty good. So for me, creating balance and practicing self-care was really about a physical routine. I've been a runner for 25 years. My knees are starting to not want to be a runner anymore. So I had to figure out what else I could do. And when I would do things like take walks, I would feel like I wasn't really doing anything because I wasn't getting that same exertion. And so when I looked at balance and implementing a physical routine, I had to actually really remove that idea of if you're not working out really hard, you're not doing enough. And I had to start to implement movement. And so there was a lot of grace and self-understanding around creating a 10-minute walk and then a 30-minute walk. And then maybe walking a little bit faster. And then one time I walked with weights and I felt very silly the entire time I was doing it. But I started to feel a little bit better because I was prioritizing my ability to move my body. And what happened was, in moving my body outside more, I was getting more vitamin D from the sun, and I was teaching myself to prioritize the time that I needed to take in order to be well. So my first step in my action plan was, what does it look like to create balance? Well, it looks like going home on time. And then it looks like going for a walk. So that's where I started with step number 1. If things have come up for you, that's fantastic. I'm super excited to hear about your brainstorming. And then the second one, what refreshes you the most? How do you create space to do this on a regular basis? Well, again, rather than thinking about adding things to your routine, let's look at what's not working in your routine. So if I feel really good hanging out with my dogs and taking them for a walk, I'm going to implement my movement along with my responsibility to them. So I feel refreshed when I get to go outside and do that. So that's where the walking plan came in, plus the whole idea of it's okay if I just walk. I don't have to run a marathon to be physically fit. And then how do I create space? Well, I had a better work on time. And I asked my boss at the time to keep me accountable for that. Didn't always happen. Sometimes MedQuest applications come in, or credentialing paperwork, or somebody knocks on the door at 4:29 and you're supposed to shut the doors at 4:30. Those things are going to happen. But the idea is to create the intention and the discipline around it so that most of the time you're successful at it. And then how do we avoid burnout? Well, I hate to break it to you, but you got to recognize stress before you can recognize burnout, because stress is the precursor. It's when we become overwhelmed and overburdened and we start to get that feeling of like, I just don't want to do this anymore. And so I started to recognize that about a year before I left Helping Hands, knowing that there needed to be a plan if I was going to exit out. So what does it look like to create balance? How do you practice self-care? What's one thing that you can create space for in your habit, in your day-to-day? And then how do we recognize when we're stressed out? Well, let's start with, you have time for everything that you make a priority, but this doesn't mean that you can prioritize everything. You got to choose really, really wisely. One of the things that I learned very quickly moving from a structured work environment to my own business is that everything can't be a priority. There's just not enough time in the day. And so I started to look at practices that people used in order to stay on task. And I've discovered that the one that's most effective for me is the sets of 3. So 3 things that are non-negotiable that absolutely have to get done today, 3 things that it would be kind of nice to get done today, and 3 things that in a world without any sort of distraction, I would also get done. And what that did was created space and created time for me to plan weeks. And so I was able to recognize what I needed to prioritize on a day-to-day basis or a week-to-week basis, and then actually get those tasks done. So some days I would get all 3 done, and then I would move on to the next 3. Some days I would only get those 3 done, and then I would need to run for the rest of the day. So it just kind of depends on how you choose your priorities, what you need to prioritize. For example, returning somebody's phone call who wants to volunteer at your agency might be more pressing on before the holidays because you're trying to increase volunteer turnout, but may not be a priority in July when you're working on getting applications in for grants. So they are changeable throughout the year. It's a fun little graphic if it'll help you if you struggle with freeing up time or removing things off your schedule that are not a priority. When I was early on in my career, I used to think that playing games on my phone was a super healthy activity for me. There's no judgment here, but for me. And I would spend at least an hour to an hour and a half a day spending just playing games on my phone. And I realized that I was spending a lot of time doing that, but it didn't actually bring me any joy, and it didn't actually make me I thought it was an escape, and it was a way for me to like zone out and not have to worry about, whatever it is that I'm responsible for that day. But what it ended up being was a total time suck. And so I was spending a high amount of time on it, but it wasn't actually netting me any results. You start to look at this graphic and you want to figure out where things go and why. You can take your typical day-to-day or your typical week, and you can drop things in each of these boxes. I might suggest using a dry erase board because they do change over time, or a piece of scratch paper. But if you find that you have a significant amount of things in high priority and high time spent, you may need to take a look at just that box and take away some things that maybe are less priority, or you might need to renegotiate them. So feel free to screenshot, but the PowerPoint will be available to you guys. So if you're trying to better understand your schedule and why you feel like you never have free time, it may be helpful to engage in this practice. So we're at about the halfway. I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a thought challenge. One, the initial question is, do I want to be well? And I think we have to start with that. I mean, I am a licensed therapist. I do with what our very, very baseline of care is. And that's the thing. A lot of us say that we want to feel well or that we want to be well, but we don't really know that we actually want that. We don't really know what wellness looks like, and we don't really know what it feels like to be well. We also don't necessarily have a plan that helps us stay well. So we'll try something and it may not work for 2 weeks, and then we become discouraged and we sort of fall back into old patterns. This is kind of where discipline comes in. And your first question is, do I really want to be well, or do I thrive off the chaos? And if you get to the point where you can say, you know what, I do want to feel well and I am willing to prioritize my wellness, great. We'll move on to the question, what will help me move through this challenge, deep wellness more efficiently? What do I need? Maybe you need to start seeing a clinician so that you can unload some of the stressful things that you deal with in your day-to-day, so that person can help carry that burden for you and you can relieve yourself of some of that. Maybe you need your kids to start doing the dishes after dinner because that's one time where you could use 15 minutes to chat with them about their day. They're doing the dishes, they're cleaning up the kitchen, and you're asking them about school. So you're getting that relationship, that emotional wellness. Maybe you need your boss to allow you to take your lunch break for 45 minutes instead of 30 minutes, and then you make up 15 minutes of the day so that you can go every day for 15 minutes after you eat your food. Be creative with these things so that you can ask for the help that you need. The third question is, how might I change to implement or influence the process? All of these things are dependent on us making a decision. They don't have to be huge decisions. You don't have to decide to become an ultra marathoner. Excuse the running examples. They tend to be the first ones that come to mind. But, you know, what do I need to do? For me, in private practice, it was starting my day later. If I start my day at a morning, then I know that my block of time is open for me to be able to work out. And I think at the end of the day, doing that has made a huge difference in my ability to prioritize my wellness. I don't really want to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go work out. And so if I start my day later, if that's an option for you, it really helped me be able to provide time and give myself permission to be able to implement this change process. And I got to tell you, I've been self-employed for just over 2 years. It's still a work in progress. There are still some days where I wake up and I'm like, I don't want to be disciplined today. I don't want to make that choice today. But those are the days where I can say, all right, maybe today's not the day. So how might I change? How might I shift my perspective? And then who else is required? If you have young children at home and you need your partner to step in and do childcare, or you have young children at home and you got to drop them off at grandma and grandpa's for an hour so that you can go for a walk. Maybe they come with you on a walk, and walking is your wellness plan for physical. It really, you know, be as creative as you want to be and try to brainstorm with people who you need to support you with that. And then what needs to be in place? Well, for me, it was about shifting my schedule and then being disciplined about that, not letting people creep into it. So they don't always have to be these like big, powerful shifts. Sometimes it's really just after dinner, we're going to go for a walk instead of watching TV, or after dinner, we're going to go for a walk instead of playing on our phones. Up to you guys. So if you want to move a little bit beyond wellness, we're going to talk a little bit about the 3 R's. So the difference between prioritizing something and not prioritizing something is leaning in versus leaning out. And I think for purposes of wellness, try to create as simple a process and an opportunity for you as possible. Try not to make this more complicated than it needs to be. You don't, like I said, you don't need an ultra marathoner unless that's your goal. And if that is your goal, then things are going to have to shift. So when you lean in, think about, what can I implement right now? what can I work on implementing, or what's my kind of long-term vision with how I want to see myself in a month or 2 months. And they don't need to be huge goals. They can be small goals, but think about what I can do immediately. Maybe I can set aside 5 minutes every single morning in my car, in the parking lot at work, to jot down things that I need to get done that day so that I can prioritize. And then when you lean out, think about, what are the things I need to stop doing? For me, honestly, I need to stop playing on my phone so much. Like scrolling social media and watching the news, although it was an interesting time the last couple of weeks, but I need to stop doing that. I mean, at some point, my weekly updates with how much screen time I have are going to like make me physically ill. So I need to probably stop scrolling so much on my phone. I probably spend at least an hour at night just scrolling mindlessly. And so that's really one thing that I can stop myself from doing right now. What do I want to replace that with? I want to replace that with going for a walk, going to the beach, walking my dogs, spending time with my husband, reading a book, doing a meditation, writing in a journal. I mean, the list is endless. Those are things that will really help me feel more well than just mindlessly scrolling. So the leaning in and leaning out long-term visions will match, but it is a combination. What can I start doing? And then what can I stop doing? So this is your COVID-based 3 R's. Number 1, be responsive. If you're working from home, I know a lot of you are frontline workers and a lot of you are doing out in the community work. But if you're working from home, set yourself up for success by communicating with your team. Make sure that your team knows what you're doing. It doesn't have to send them an email every 5 minutes, but be responsive when people ask you for things. Your workday may not look exactly the same as it did a year ago, but the more responsive you are and the more responsible you are, the more you'll set yourself up for success and kind of less heartache at the other end when people are like, well, where is this? And what have you been doing with your time? And so the more proactively responsive you are, the better off your team will be, because they'll know that they can get what they need from you. So if you're furloughed or laid off, take a few steps each day to check your unemployment claim, check in with your representatives, send follow-up emails, even if you feel fatigued by it. And I have got to tell you, I've been following some of the unemployment stuff online, and people are like 30 to 32 to 35 weeks fatigued following up on their unemployment claims. But every single day, be responsive to yourself and take the time to make that phone call, send that follow-up email, because in the overall picture, you're sticking with the routine that you've created so that you can continue to feel well. Be respectful. Totally new normal. Most of you know I don't really believe in the idea of normal, but this is a new way of doing things. So it's hope. I know it's going to shift things ongoing and in the long term, but if you're an essential worker and you're going to work every day, things are different. Like the way that we experience stress now is not the same that we experienced stress 6 months ago. It's not the same way that we experienced stress a year ago. So let's be super compassionate with each other. If you think that you're being compassionate with your coworkers and you're being honest with them and you're asking for what you need and you're asking if you can provide anything for them, stop. Take a super deep breath and ask yourself if you can do that more. If you have more to give, more compassion will always win out. Be super respectful and understand that how you experience a crisis is not the same as how somebody else does. And so your reactions are influenced by, and especially when you're in leadership and the responsibility is really on you, be very careful and aware of how you're acting with your teams. This really can influence how each other is managing this particular crisis. Be resilient. Resilience is one of my favorite words. Sometimes it's all I need to turn my phone off and go do something else with my brain. But, this is temporary. And from what we know right now, we will come out of this COVID crisis and we will redefine what it looks like to be workers. We will get through this. We are stronger as a community because we're learning from each other. One of my favorite things that I've learned in this entire crisis, and it may sound silly, but it is meaningful to me, is how many meetings we had that could have been emails. It's amazing to me how much time has been freed up simply by we can't get together in person. So, we are stronger together and we are communicating differently and potentially more efficiently. In a bigger picture, like the earth is healing. I don't know if you guys saw the pictures of Waikiki when there was no tourism, and I mean, we weren't allowed on the beach anyway, but like the water was so clear and so blue. And I think we'll be forever changed by the lessons that we've learned from this particular experience. And as you think about creating your wellness plan and your routine, remember that your routine could really save your sanity. Having the ability to get up in the morning, go for a walk, that could potentially really save you a lot of heartache if you put yourself first. So, a couple last thoughts for you. You really are strong and you really are capable. I tell everyone from our houseless consumers to our direct service to our leaders and managers to our executives to our state, you really are strong and you really are capable and you can do this. You can identify time in your day for you to implement some sort of wellness practice, whether it's 5 minutes or 50 minutes. You can do it and the time is there. Creating routine will really help you feel less chaotic. It will make your days feel like they've started in a very structured way. And just remember, a routine doesn't mean you do the exact same thing every single day. For those of you that have tried the broccoli and grilled chicken diet, you know that that gets very old very quickly. So your routine doesn't mean you have to do everything the same every day, but it does give you a baseline of care for yourself so that then you can give yourself a little bit of calmness. You know that this is what you're going to do every day. And, in all honesty, like we really do have each other. I can't tell you how many of my friends have called me and said, I really think I need to go talk to somebody. Like, do you have any ideas of who might be a good fit for me? Or I can't tell you how many teams have called me and said, can you come talk about wellness with us? Or we have the time to talk about treatment planning. Can you help us develop stronger treatment plans? Or the hospitals have called and said, can you help me figure out how to communicate with this family? So, ask for help, have a conversation with someone who can either provide a kind ear for you or you can provide a kind ear for them. Do things that are responsible, have a conversation 6 feet apart while you're wearing masks when you're supporting each other. It's not the same, but it is still something. And so when you think about being realistic and creating this plan, understand what you're capable of. You are capable of lots of things, but you don't have to be a superhero. You don't have to show up for every Zoom meeting. You don't have to show up for every Zoom Pohana. You don't have to show up for every Zoom Thanksgiving with every part of your family. Just be realistic about what you can do and to create that boundary around what helps you feel well. And this might be the year that you really go internally and you develop and create that plan that you implement. And then next year you're like, wow, how come I didn't do that earlier? So understand that you don't have to be a superhero, but you do have the capacity to make one decision or one shift. And that's all that anyone can really ask of themselves. So thank you for spending some time with me and talking about my favorite things, i.e. wellness, something I've struggled with for the entire 41 years of my life. I like to think that I have a pretty good balance now, but I will tell you, last week I had a little bit of a breakdown with a friend and she was like, hey, listen, take a breath. We can figure this out. So it really, all of us are very susceptible to trying to figure out what we do next. And there's a little picture of my family. That's Peanut, who I can't believe stood still for that picture. But that's my husband, Tommy, and they really are the reason that I do the work that I do and why I dedicate my own wellness plan and stay committed to it, because I got to show up for them. Contact information, the mission of ChangeWorks, and I'm so grateful that you all came together with me and shared this space with me. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Heather. That was really good. We want to open it up for discussion. Are you available to answer some questions?
Of course. Of course. I'm going to stop sharing. Sometimes I got to talk myself through it.
So I want to invite our attendees to go to the chat box and write down your questions, and then Heather will respond to them. Thank you.
Sure.
So while people are formulating their, okay, I think we have somebody here. Chat. Oh, okay. Well, people are formulating their questions. Maybe I can ask you a question to get the discussion
Sure.
going.
Of course.
So how do you deal with guilt?
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah, great question. In fact, Anna, I should put a slide in about that because you're not the only
okay,
person that's asked me about that.
okay,
You know,
okay. I'm transferring it back to you.
no. I should do a slide on guilt.
Yeah.
So guilt is an emotional reaction to a previous experience. Somebody has shamed us for taking time. Somebody has told us that it's not worth it or that we don't need to. I have a couple of friends who are very fit and healthy, and I remember we were out pre-COVID. We were talking about like how we keep ourselves healthy and what kind of foods we eat to keep ourselves healthy. And one of my friends said to another friend, "Well, I don't know why you have to eat healthy anyway. You're so thin." And I realized that like guilt is a reaction to something that somebody else thinks that you should or shouldn't be doing. And so when we come internally and we make a decision to better our own self and bring a different version of ourselves out into the community, it really is about us. It's about me. I know that if I show up to a conference and I'm authentically sharing my truths, it will come out that way. And, you know, even if somebody afterwards says, "Oh, that wasn't really very meaningful for me," great. Maybe you're not at the point in your life where you need to develop a wellness plan. So, in dealing with guilt, there's kind of two things that you can do. One, ask clarifying questions to the person who's implying that you need to feel guilty if it's someone else. And two, ask clarifying questions to yourself if it's you that feels guilty. What's missing? What do I need to better understand? You know, where's my guilt coming from? I have a ton of sadness around not traveling to see my family this year for the holidays. It's like my favorite time of year to go and be with my husband's family and see my family, and we get to fly. I love traveling. And so, you know, I feel very sad that we've made the choice not to do that this year, and that's okay. But there's a difference between feeling sad and feeling guilty because my family thinks I should be doing it because half my family believes that COVID's not a thing. I think it's a thing. I got to protect me and my people. I got a 95-year-old grandma, not really interested in being the reason that she moves on. So here's the decision that we've made. And so I don't need to feel guilty for that because I've made the decision that's best for me.
Heather, I think we have a couple of questions in the Q&A box. Do you want to go over them and answer them? Please, thank you.
Dawn, you can absolutely get a copy of the presentation. Deborah, thank you. We will email you the slides. What's the most difficult thing about being self-employed? I don't know how much time you have, but the most difficult thing about being self-employed is creating a boundary. You know, there's so many things that I want to do. There's so many events that are important to me, so many people that are important to me. You guys know that I started my work in Hawaii working in a dual diagnosis treatment facility, and then moved on to Helping Hands, where I worked with the chronically homeless, chronic substance use, often dual diagnosed populations. So some of our most difficult people. And I got to tell you, there was always, you said 15 minutes. That's how much time you have. But the most difficult thing for me is actually creating a boundary about what I get involved in. You know, I have some private practice clients, so they often take priority because I got to show up for them because they've hired me to do that. And then the other is making time for administrative tasks because they're just as important as on. So I still have to follow up on invoices. I still have to create trainings. I still have to work with my subcontractors to make sure they're getting paid and they're doing the work that they need to do. And so for me, a lot of it was, what does balance look like? Because it doesn't look the same as it did when I worked at Helping Hands. And creating a schedule. So I have several different notepads that I do the 3-3-3. Every day I have 3 things that have to get done that are non-negotiable, and then 3 things that I would love to get done. Obviously, if those things don't get done, they get moved into the non-negotiable and the next day. But yeah, I'm happy to share any sort of tricks with you about that. but that is the most difficult part, is just getting to do everything I want to do. That's a great
Okay.
question.
Yeah, thank you for answering.
Sure.
Right. Oh, wow,
Jacqueline,
that's a good question. Yeah.
ask them if they want you to redefine the word selfish, because I think our community has created a negative connotation with the word. But here's the thing, it is selfish. Like, creating time is selfish because you're dedicating it to yourself. And so when people say it's selfish for you to insist on an hour to yourself every single day, ask them why. Why do you think that's selfish? And then depending on their answer, you can say something like, well, I'm the best version of myself when I get outside and I get some sunshine, or I'm the best version of myself when I go surf for an hour or 4. So this is the time I'm going to prioritize for myself. And I'm grateful that you asked the question, but maybe you want to be a little more gentle about it in the future. And then you can give them that sort of reminder. It's cool that you don't agree with me, but this is what I'm doing for me.
Okay.
I think I posted in the wrong place. Reposting. Do you help folks? Thanks, Deborah. That's awesome. Do you help folks who have ADHD, or have tips for those who have trouble staying focused with an overactive brain? You know, I have kind of lots of tips and tricks. ADHD is a complicated disorder, so we try not to pigeonhole it into like one way. But if I hear your question correctly, when you have trouble staying focused, there's a couple of like snap your finger things that you can do. One is try to understand how long you can focus for, and then create your tasks around that. So if it's setting a timer on your phone, if it's having one of those cool, they just made these like new kind of egg timers that like have fun shapes and stuff like that. So you can get a little timer and set a timer, and then use a task management list. Like do a 3-3-3, or do a, I have to get these 5 things done today and they're non-negotiable. And then remind yourself that each task is a decision that you're making. So I'm deciding I'm going to write up this 11:57 because it's due today. And then that task, and then go take a walk for 5 minutes, or go get a huge glass of water, a coffee, whatever it is. But find those little tasky tricks that you can do that help you not only get focused, but stay focused for whatever that amount of time is. And secondary to that, I want to remind you guys, last year at this time, I was able to sit at the co-working place where I worked for 4 hours and crank out work. Now, if I get 50 minutes out of myself before I take a break. So these things are fluid, they change, they evolve over time. And I think that, you know, you got to give yourself a little bit of grace too. I see Deborah posted in the chat.
Mm-hmm. You want to read it loud?
I was a mom that did everything for everyone for 30 plus years, and I didn't know how to self-care. And now that I'm doing it, I hear a lot of background comments. It's okay. Yep, it absolutely is okay. I'm better when I do this. I'm the best version of me. If I don't like who I am, if I don't care for me. I mean, preach, I couldn't have said it better myself. It's absolutely true. And I think, you know, the reason that we talk about this over and over and over again, and the reason that most of the time the advice change, is because it really is what works. And Deborah, I don't know if you had this experience, but like, it's hard. It's hard to like balance everything and find the time and make creative ways of doing it. Like, you just have to keep at it until you figure out sort of like what you're navigating and what feels good. It's not always going to look the same every day, and you're not always going to be successful. So like the days that I don't get to go for a walk, I'm definitely crankier. So I apologize for any of you that have talked to me on days where I haven't moved my body. But then it's like, it's cool. I'll just try again tomorrow. And when tomorrow comes, that discipline kicks in and my routine kicks in too. So, oof. Yeah, diving is an amazing option. My husband surfs and no cellular on his watch. So for those 2-3 hours, like, good luck to you, but no phone, no connection. Let's see.
I like this
How can we be more
question.
helpful, to our family members who need to practice more self-care without sounding condescending? Encouragement.
Heather,
Go ahead.
can I just interrupt you on that one? I think I have a question that maybe you can segue to it is, as managers, how do we make sure that our staff do not,
Burnout.
burn? Yeah, yes.
Yeah. So, the answer is twofold. One is you got to do your work. Like, you really do have to do your work as a manager and have a really good balance of self-care and other care. I most of the time failed at it in my 4 years at Helping Hands because I almost always put everybody else first before I did my own work. And what happened was weight gain and stress and eating badly and not having any emotional space for my family, things like that. So, I think that one, you got to reel yourself in and you got to be a good model of what you're trying to do. You don't have to model perfection, but you do got to do something and try something. Like, you want to make fun of me for going for a 15 after dinner? Cool. I'll go by myself. No big deal. That's cool. Or you want to make fun of me for going for a 15-minute walk after lunch during our workday? That's cool. I'm going to just go by myself then. And so some of it has to do with self-confidence too. But Melissa, to specifically answer your question, it could just be about shifting the way that the house works or the family works. Like, when you guys get together for like a beach picnic, maybe you implement an activity that moves your body and that helps get people involved so that they're doing something fun. They don't really realize that they're doing wellness. Be creative and be simple. Like, try not to make it too complicated. And when you encourage them, be like, hey, you want to come for a walk with me? Or, hey, you want to turn off your phone and we'll play Bananagrams, which is one of my most favorite games to play with my family because it's very stressful, but I really want to win. So it's just about making small choices to shift the way that we do things. These are such great questions.
Yeah.
You're welcome, Melissa. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. And I'm sorry, Melissa, I interrupted your question there. Heather was about to answer you. I just thought it came together, so I apologize.
Yeah, no, I thought it was an excellent parallel. It's, our family life and our work life are so closely paralleled, especially when we work with families, right? So I think modeling and, easygoing encouragement can be some of the best ways to help shift other people's thought processes or behaviors. Great questions.
Mm-hmm. Did we get another one?
I think.
Do you see clients who don't reside on your island through your private practice?
Mm-hmm. And if I'm not the right fit, I will happily help you find the right fit for you. I don't have a preference through my private practice. So my therapy practice is private pay only. I don't do any insurance plans because the majority of my work is actually out in the community with agencies through lots of things: training, clinical supervision, program development, accreditation. I do a ton of 1157 specifically for Ohana members. I work with both hospitals and so I don't see a ton of people through private practice, but I love working with high-level executive leadership because often those are the folks that really need permission and space to be able to be present in whatever way they need to be and ask questions in a really safe place. But I love, love, love our chronically housed population. They fascinate me. They ask all kinds of good questions. They really drive me to figure out what the best fit for them is in terms of housing and ongoing community-based care. So I don't know. I don't think I really, I don't know. I guess I specialize in the more severely and persistently mentally ill, but I like working with all populations. The only thing I don't do is work with kids. It's not my talent. There are so many talented therapists that work with children and teens, just not me. I am a licensed mental health counselor. And you guys can go to changeworkshawaii.com and read a little bit about ChangeWorks and what they do. If you're interested, and you're welcome to send me an email if you have more questions too. I'm happy to answer them for you. So I want to give you guys time between your sessions too. Like, is there already a break, Anna, or do I need to say goodbye?
In a couple of minutes, we're going to be starting the final plenary session. We're going to have Ian DeJong. And so I just want to say thank you, Heather. You've been a wonderful speaker and you did not disappoint. You brought a lot of good stuff up that we need to think about as frontliners. So thank you so much. You take care. Thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thanks, Harold.
Yeah, Harold's here. Harold's here.
Thank you so much, guys.
I want to share with you email address, Heather's email address, one more time. Can you see it? Can you see that?
Yep, we can see it.
Yeah, okay, awesome. Okay, so it's Heather at ChangeWorks. How did you come up with that name, ChangeWorks?
Because change works, man. Like one little change. I don't know. Honestly, I think it's just demonstrative of my life, right? Like I met my husband and I moved in with him across the country 3 months later. Somebody told me I should become a therapist. I was in grad school 6 weeks later. So one day I was like, oh, change works. And then I was like, oh, great. And then it was the business. So I don't know, just my impulse control, I guess.
Okay. I don't know if there's any more final comments, questions. I think that was it. I hope we addressed everything. So thank you all and have a great rest of the day. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.